Welcome to the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 119.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light.
Welcome back to the Veterinary Project Podcast. You are joined by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Mike, how's it shaking?
Johnny, let's not worry about me today. The audience wants to hear about you and your trip to Nicaragua, and I'm dying to know. You said you had 5 or 6 days there, isolated, no Wi-Fi, no cell phone coverage. I need to know how you handled it.
Well, to start with, it wasn't as dire as what you put out there. Once we got down there, we recognized it was voluntary. So me not having my SIM card was my own fault. And I thought I'd be able to get a new SIM card down there, but we don't speak enough Spanish to be able to make that work. And I was using an old phone. So that was myself. And it was great. On the overall, for the first 5 days, not having it meant that I was forced to get out of some of the habits that I've already built up in myself, including looking at email way too often, YouTube, Instagram, all those other ridiculous apps. I didn't have them. So it was pretty fantastic.
I kind of, in my own head, was picturing you just like a little bit twitchy, like scratching your skin a lot, just hitting your phone, you know, maybe a tear rolling down the cheek.
The best piece was, and thank God for this, is that I'd given notice to the team that I was going to be out for the first 5 days. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. Got a very great team, both on the Bridgeland side, Mosaic side. Candace was with me, so we were able to make it work. And yes, there was a lot to catch up onto once we were back into Wi-Fi, but hey, that was a choice. Nice. So it was a really nice 5 days without it.
Good. Glad you got some time away. I've heard, I guess without going too deep into it, I've been reading about, you know, people doing kind of dopamine resets, right? Because like we're just bombarded social media, you know, all this stuff, all of our phones are just designed to give us those dopamine hits, you know? And so I've heard of people, you know, intentionally trying to like really restrict and cut that down and kind of wean off of that. So
in the last week and a half since I've been back now, 2 things have changed dramatically. One, my coffee intake. Because of just the timeline and the heat and down there, we didn't need to have as much coffee as what I'm used to back in Canada, which allowed me to come down from my 4 to my 2 cups that I need to be drinking a day, which is fantastic. And the second thing is the time in the morning. Use time in the morning for exercise and not getting onto apps, checking out the business news, all the rest of it. That's all gone. And wow, do I feel a lot more clear. You hear about decision fatigue. Why would I waste all that energy first time in the morning? It's easier said than done. We know that. This reset allowed me to just say, enough's enough. When I get up in the morning, it's time to get to the gym, do what I need to do, not worry about that crap. There's enough time in the day to get it done. So those would, I'd say, be 2 really nice habit resets.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the vacation. I tried my best not to bother you while you were down there. So hopefully you had some R&R and good to have you back. Yeah.
Yep. No, it was great. And for anybody that wants to go see something different, Costa Rica, I've spent a lot of time in. Nicaragua was fantastic for all of us. There was 9 of us in total, and really great experience. Really enjoyed the country. Super nice people, relatively inexpensive depending on where you're going. Nicaragua, a place to go. We spent all the time in the south and really worthwhile. So that's my 2 cents for Nicaragua in half a second here. So for today's episode, really excited as well too to be bringing on one of our own, being a Mosaic employee here. Andrea joined us in early January of 2022 after a really nice long career in a different organization. She was looking for change. We were looking to add to our team. So Andrea came forward, and really today's episode is all about educating us, hey Mike, about the value of an employer brand, about EVP. I'll leave that for you guys to even know what that is, because I think this is very fresh, both in the business world and especially in the veterinary industry, where I do not see many articles at all discussing this great topic. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I hear of brand, but I guess not in this EVP way. I hadn't heard it that way before.
No, so some nice tactics, as well as how to think big picture and then move down at a clinic level as you're looking at your EVP, and then how to execute. And likely, because we didn't get to everything we wanted to speak about, we'll have to get Andrea back on for part 2, execution time. So short bio, all about Andrea. She is our director of brand and talent with Mosaic Veterinary Partners, and loves all things related to talent management, employer brand, and of course, animals. Over the last 10 years, Andrea has worked with teams primarily in oil and gas to help them attract and retain the best talent, streamline talent processes, and showcase the importance of employer brand. Andrea lives in Calgary, Alberta, with her husband, son, and her rambunctious Springer Spaniel. When she isn't chasing around her toddler, you will likely find her outdoors or baking up a storm. We get into it. We go into the details. Extremely proud and happy to have Andrea Matrangolo on board. Without further ado, our conversation. Andrea, welcome to the Veterinary Project Podcast. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. For our listeners, a little bit of an excerpt as to how Andrea has gotten onto this podcast today. Just prior to going on to vacation and such, Mike and I were talking about who would be cool guests to come onto the podcast. A little bit different, and we have some amazing people that join us. And I was going, Andrea, we need to get Andrea on here and talk about all the things she's doing with Mosaic, because I think they're pretty cool. I am biased, but you come from a very cool background. You're helping us out in a big way, and not only in the veterinary industry, but throughout business. If we're speaking about the employer value proposition and some of the subject matter we're going to get into today, it's important, isn't it?
Hugely important, and so misunderstood or not understood. So so grateful for this opportunity, and really happy to be here. I'm a huge fan of you two and the podcast, so it's a gift to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, now that she's buttered us up and said nice things, which means I can't let her go tomorrow, let's start. Let's start off, because Andrea, you are a director of brand and talent. Been with the company since the start of the year. We have done a lot of work together. And I think even before we get into those details, you're new to the veterinary industry.
I am.
Tell us about a little bit about your career journey and how the heck you ended up with Mosaic Veterinary Partners.
Yeah, no, great question. I think majority of my career has been in oil and gas, specifically downstream oil and gas. And, out of university, I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and like a lot of people, fell into the world of human resources, and fell in love with the less traditional HR pieces, the what I call the fun part of HR, which is talent management and talent attraction and retention and engagement and those type of pieces. And then throughout my career in the talent management space, pretty quickly saw a connect between employer brand and storytelling, and the candidate experience that underpins a lot of these talent components. And so my last 10 years before Mosaic was with Parkland Corporation, formerly known as Parkland Fuel Corporation, and was lucky enough to see that company grow from, probably 500 employees to almost 7,000 internationally. And so it was really neat to be part of that growth story. Went on maternity leave. I have a 2-year-old at home who keeps me very busy right now. And an opportunity came up with Mosaic Veterinary Partners, which is, a space that I have very near and dear to my heart, based on the love that I have for animals. And I've been an equestrian most of my life. And so to think about working in a space where you have the ability to have that connect with animals and apply your love for talent management and brand is like gold. So started the conversation with you and Dr. Andrews at the time, and the rest is history. I think, the opportunity at Mosaic was at this stage where we had a really cool story to tell. but didn't have the time and the resources and the right way to tell that story. And again, that was music to my ears when I heard that. And so it was really an opportunity to build that drew me to the team, along with the team themselves. So I could go on and on about, the initial joining factors, but long story short, the rest is history.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you. I think that's a great summary of background. When we go into a little bit of brand and talent, talking a little bit about past role, what drew you to that side of HR? What did you find alluring in terms of the challenge that is hiring?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. And I honestly have to think back to, how that part really stuck with me, because I think it's one of the pieces of HR that a lot of people start out in and quickly move away from, because you either love the space of recruitment or you learn to hate it very quickly and say, I'd like to be an HR generalist or a business partner and never want to be involved in recruitment in my life. And I was really drawn to the people side of things and telling the story and understanding if there was a right match between an opportunity and working at the company. And I think it was my love for finding that right match, and feeling that level of reward that comes from seeing somebody find the right role and then ultimately succeed in the role, that still exists today. And so I think that's that nice balance between having that connect with people, but also storytelling in an authentic way, that really just changed a lot when I was at Parkland, honestly, because we were growing so quickly and expanding internationally that those EVP, those employee value proposition elements changed over time, and so did the story. So it always felt really interesting for me.
And then you come into the vet space in early 2022 at what could still be considered the height of the veterinary professional shortage. How much of a shock was it, or is it still to the system to recognize where the gaps are between what we know we need in our practices to be able to succeed for our team members, for the clients, the patients we're looking after, compared to what is the reality of availability of veterinary professionals? Was it a shock to you? And we've had many conversations on differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I know, when you and I spent time as part of the interview process, you talk about that and you read about it, and it's not until you actually live it where you realize, holy cow, there's a big gap here, and the candidate market is so different. And so I still feel like every day it's a bit of a learning curve. And I think that's what I love about it. I think you have to constantly shift your way of thinking to go, okay, that tactic isn't working. So what are we going to try on this side of things? And you have to be nimble in this space because the candidate pools are constantly changing. But you also really have to think hard about how you're positioning yourself as an employer. And we'll talk more about that today, obviously, with employer brand and different value proposition elements. But it's even more reason, and that's the exciting part for me, is that you have to really get creative and think hard about how you're positioning your brand to be special and unique. Because if you're not, any candidate that might have interest in you will scroll through your website. And if they don't know who you are and what you stand for in 5 seconds or less, guaranteed they're going to your competitor. And it sounds simple when I say it like that. It's, just make your brand and put it on the website and make it special and unique. But there's a lot of work that goes into building a brand. And so it's a time-consuming thing for organizations. And I don't think a lot of people have heard of employer brand. It's a fairly new concept. Or B, maybe A and B, have never heard of an EVP, what an EVP is, how to build it, what it's comprised of, who are your key stakeholders in building one of those. There's just so many unknowns that really, there's a huge benefit to having somebody dedicated to EVP, but it realistically takes some time to build up a team, or to, have the budget to hire an external consultant to help you with something like that.
Excellent. I am so excited about those that have not heard about A or B. Employee brand, we recognize that. You see that in the big brands in the world, Cokes, Pepsis, etc. and even now in the corporate world of veterinary medicine, VCAs and Canada Vet Strategy, there's a number of different corporates, or even in the independents, those that have great brands. But how do you wrap that together, as you said, into a story? I hope a lot of people get a lot out of this today, because it's a subject matter into itself. And we at Mosaic over the last year have been doing a lot learning ourselves. So let's jump into that. Is, for starters, a little bit of a definition around EVP. What is it, and why the heck should anybody care about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think what I'll do, Jonathan, is we'll talk about EVP and what it is, but employer brand goes so hand in hand with an EVP that we'll touch on both. And EVP stands for employee or employer value proposition. The terms are interchangeable. Some people say employee, some people say employer, but really an employee value proposition is the core of what you stand for and what you offer to your employees. Employer brand is really the perception that exists in people's minds of what it might be like to work at your company. So the EVP is the key things you stand for and offer to your employees that support all of the employer brand information that is built by so many different things that are honestly really out of your control. Employer brand can be influenced, but to influence employer brand effectively, you have to have a strong EVP and different value proposition elements that speak to who you are at your core.
Interesting. So for somebody that's never heard of this before,
yes,
I think one of the places where you were able to simplify it for me in the past, having been another individual that had not heard of this before, is what are you putting out to the world? And then what is the world bringing back to you in terms of what are you directing and storytelling and telling and authenticating out to your employers or employees or potentials? And then what's coming back to you from a control? Is there a way that someone who's never heard of this before goes about Googling it? I know you've done lots of study and learning about it. How have you come to be educated in the form of EVP and what it means to our employees?
Mm-hmm. The good news is that it's become such a hot topic that you can Google the heck out of this and you will find plethora of materials on employee value proposition and employer brand. So honestly, I'm a Google whiz. I think most of us are. So I think if you want to learn more about this to see if it's something you'd like to learn more about or better understand, there are so many great. Heck, the Harvard Business Review has some great articles on employer brand and EVP, and great examples about what Netflix has done to build a strong brand for themselves and have different EVP elements that have really been game changing for them. But there's also some great articles out there on, startup companies and what they've done to position their brand differently and effectively. And I think aside from what you're coming across on the internet, I'm a huge fan of a gentleman named James Ellis, Ellis. And one of my favorite books is called Talent Chooses You. And it's actually a free downloadable book, or you can order it on Amazon. And I think James charges like $10 for shipping. He doesn't take a penny from the book itself. And it's a really great book on understanding employer brand, what the connect is to having an employee value proposition and building one. And it's also great for, I would say, companies or teams who really want to understand that connect to recruiting and how different tactics in recruiting can really impact your brand as a whole and contribute to engagement and retention and less turnover, help your recruitment and time to fill. There's so many factors that this one book in particular speaks about. And James Ellis has great clips, lots of YouTube videos, minute to 3 minute long videos, podcasts that are wonderful. I'm a huge fan and I have yet to get through half of his materials. There's so much of it. So I'd highly, highly recommend.
Excellent. Actionable items right there.
Yeah.
Mike, I can see you chomping there.
Well, no, this is kind of fascinating. I guess the one place I'd like to drill down maybe a little bit deeper, and and looking at it high level, I mean, like you said, Jonathan, when you think of large brands, like I think of, Coke and Pepsi. And so coming down to the vet clinic level, when people are, starting on this, they're like, okay, we're going to develop our brand. We're going to develop our employee value proposition. It maybe people resort to like I don't know. I don't want to call them cliche, but the ones like, oh, we're a great place to work. And that's just so broad. Like, that doesn't tell me a lot personally. Or, like we treat our animals great. And I heard you say figuring out what makes you special and unique. So how can a company or an employer like go a level deeper from just sort of those surface, like broad strokes that almost everyone says, down to like, okay, this is why this particular place is special. This is what makes you unique. Because I feel like that's where the real value is.
That's it. And that's how you build an employee value proposition, is by asking some of those questions. And so I'll try to think of a succinct way to, and it will oversimplify, but I'm hopeful it will give people some real tangible things and tools to help, go back and at the clinic, ask their team some questions around how to really build a brand of their own. And I think it really starts with an understanding of people's key motivations and professional motivations. And let's say for me, I'm a job seeker. All I want is to move up in my career. I want in 5 years to be a partner in a clinic, whatever it may be. And that for me is a key motivator. But to a colleague of mine, he or she might really be motivated by money, or maybe motivated by values. So that when that person sees on a website that there's a strong declaration around mission, vision, values that they really resonate with, that for them is a driver to work there. Whereas for me, I might not invest too much in that, because I see words like growth and development and mentorship, and those really resonate with me. So I think the first thing an organization must do is have conversations, not just at the executive level or the partnership level. It's critical that you have a variety of stakeholders or people at the table having a conversation about who you are and what you stand for. Because the challenging part is when you have partners only having this conversation, they're often living a different world than an RVT at the clinic or whoever that may be. So it's really important to have a varied distribution of folks that you're speaking with about, in our case, who is Mosaic? What do we stand for? What are your frustrations? What do you love most about working here? And it's asking a whole bunch of these questions to really paint this picture of who are we realistically, and get away from the aspirational side of things. You want to get to the reality of who you are today, not what you're striving to be. Because the problem is if I'm saying to you, Dr. Bug, you want to come work with us, we're an incredibly innovative company, and then you get in the door and you realize that we're computer is 10 years old, that suddenly there's a big disconnect there. So it has to transfer over to the story you're telling to prospective job seekers. It has to transfer over to, after 100+ days that they've joined on, to feel that all of those elements are in fact factual. So going back, identify your key motivations. Again, there's 10 of them. Teamwork is one, mission and values is another, ability to move up the ladder, money, there's so many, stability, the list goes on. So understanding those different motivations that are special to you is really where you can hone in on your messaging throughout a lot of your materials. When I say materials, I'm thinking about your website, I'm thinking social media platforms, I'm thinking about hard copy posters and brochures that you might have in the clinic. And once you have those conversations and can identify through an understanding of, what rewards and things make us special and what make us who we are, then you can develop that brand. But until you have lengthy conversations around what we're doing well, how we're different, and what are the things that make us really special, you cannot build an EVP. And so I think again, going back to Mosaic and the work that, Dr. Light and I have done with the Mosaic team, it started with a lot of, especially for me being new to vet med, asking a lot of silly questions around, okay, well, how is Mosaic different? Mosaic's a lot smaller, but Mosaic has this or doesn't have this. And, I was able to really get a sense quickly from the team about what the special areas were that were very unique, that the own Mosaic team who had been living this for so long couldn't even or didn't even know that those were the key differentiators until we actually talked about them. And an example for us was, we, like a lot of other veterinary practices, have a really great mentorship program that we can offer to our employees. But one of our key differentiators is, instead of having a development plan that we slide across the table to say, check this box and we can develop you by, sending you to this course and by, taking this step in 6 months or 1 year, we came up with empowerment as the bucket that we really see as a key motivator for our employees, and that we see as a key differentiator for Mosaic. And then it was kind of a light bulb moment for us where we went, empowerment is really what we're all about. And so is team and support. And I know I've spoken about really narrowing down your focus by having, that one thing that makes you special and different. And it's been a learning process for me too, to understand, okay, if we want to narrow down what we stand for so that we don't have 8 things that we're declaring to be, because if you have 8 things that you're declaring to be, it's meaningless. And that's the problem that so many companies, especially in this market, resort to when you're so desperate for talent, is we're flexible hours, we give you lunch, we give back to the community, we have great equipment. Great, but what are you about? And it gets lost if you don't have that focus. And so I'm happy to say that it actually was a really fun and rewarding experience for us at Mosaic to be able to have those conversations and have that light bulb moment where you go, exactly, you distill it down to go, okay, those are our 2 buckets. And for us, we're happy to have 2 because we so firmly believe in those 2 buckets, that A, team and support is one, and B, empowerment, and they really do go hand in hand in a lot of ways. That those are ours. But holy smokes, it took a long time to talk through those, and that's normal. And I would say, don't let that lengthy process deter anybody from diving deep into this, because the only way to position your brand in an authentic way is to have those deep, thoughtful, heartfelt conversations, and have disagreements about what you think you truly are, because not everyone will be aligned. Like I said, an RVT or a TA may feel very differently about the culture at your company than one of the doctors will. So I feel like I've gone in a couple of different directions, but you can see how complex this topic is. There's so many ways to shape your brand, and it just takes such a long time to do it. So I hope that gave a bit of context.
I'm looking at Mike. Context for you, Mike.
Oh yeah, the thing, you took the question right out of my mouth. In my head, I was already picturing, we'll pick some random vet clinic. They're going to build one of these and they're desperate for employees. So it's just like all 10 of these motivators, put them in a bucket, throw them all up there. We got to attract everyone. And I could see how people may want to go that way. Like that could be your gut reaction. But, as you're saying, it's narrow it down. And I guess just as important as what you are, like what makes you unique and special, then is also maybe what you're not, right? Like what doesn't appear on that refined list.
100%. And you touch on a really good point, Dr. Bug, because employer brand and an appropriate EVP is a filter. And it's a filter for the people that you don't want to work in your organization. And so if you can position your brand effectively to say, here's what we are, here are the behaviors we tolerate and stand for, and here are the things you reward, because what you reward is who you are as an organization. And if you don't understand that fully, it's so tricky. And so to be clear in who you are and what you stand for allows prospective candidates to look throughout your website as they're cruising for a job going, ooh, I need a bit more hand holding. I don't love that this website says innovation and creativity. I need more structure, and I know that about myself. Okay, you can go work somewhere else, and that's okay. But that's what you want in a brand. It's okay to have. And you want to have people opt out of an opportunity if they decide it's not the best fit for them.
Briefly, Andrea, for those, and there are many in the vet field right now that feel overworked, don't have, and I'm speaking management, partnership, ownership level now. They're tired. They cannot bring in, and again, this is a overstatement of the whole, which is not all true. Cannot bring new talent in. How would you recommend somebody goes about this? Do they bring in outside consultants? Is it something that you feel can be done internally with enough, I would call informal education? Is this something that can be done? We're lucky. We've got the time, the budget, the abilities to do so internally. How does the normal 1, 2, 3 vet clinic do this?
Mm-hmm. I've talked about our friend James Ellis's name a number of times. James has actually just launched a course called EVP Mastermind. And I was lucky enough to be part of his first launching of the course not too long ago. And I was part of a group with, I believe, 18 other people who had been part of James's network, and offered James some great feedback on his course. And in return, we got some fantastic time with James to, hear his perspective on our brand and answer any questions that we had. And this course is specifically targeted at individuals looking to build their brand. So James Ellis's EVP Mastermind course, I believe he's starting a new session in the next month or two. But I really think if you have questions about this, there are, like I said, so many great resources online about building your own EVP. And again, don't let it discourage you when you're reading about brand, employer brand, and brand promise, and mission, vision, values, and EVP. It's overwhelming, and a lot of these terms are used interchangeably, and quite frankly, a lot of different companies are using them incorrectly, and so that's why it's very confusing. But I'm a big believer in doing this yourself if you can. And I think as long as you can have some thoughtful conversations with your teams to speak honestly around who you are and the type of people that will be successful as you grow, I think you can peg that brand quite easily. And I hesitate when I say the word easily, because it's a tough activity without a doubt. But again, great resources out there. I would say if anyone has specific questions or wanted to have a bit of a brainstorm, I'm always available. So please reach out to me if anyone wants to bounce some ideas off of me, or needs me to help them better understand a certain topic. This is something I'm so passionate about, and it would never be a bother if you wanted to reach out and have a coffee, virtual coffee, whatever that may be. It's a space, like I said, that is new, and we're all still learning as we go. So happy to help wherever I can.
Fantastic. And thanks for that. And I hope people take advantage of that, as it is an area that, for one, we've not spoken about in the Veterinary Project podcast. And it's not something that I see, and I read a lot of articles in veterinary medicine, not in the medical stance, but the business stance. And we do not see it coming up a lot. And along those lines, then, I'd like to ask Andrea in closing, as our time's coming to an end very quickly here, is being new into the industry over the last year. And we didn't pre-record, set this up, so I'm very interested to see what you say is what has surprised you about the veterinary industry? Challenges, successes, opportunities, any of the three. What's been new to you compared to what you thought the industry would be like?
Mm-hmm. I think what surprised me, honestly, is that and I'll take a step back just by saying, I feel very lucky that I'm in a role that is not very common in this space. There are very few employer brand and talent professionals, or heck, even recruitment teams as part of clinics or larger organizations. And so I think that's been something that's been a bit surprising to me, that I hope people spend a bit more time developing and thinking about, is the candidate experience. And so it's one thing to build your brand and build a brand and walk away from it and go, oh, that's perfect. We've rocked this brand. This is different than this person over here and this person over here, and we're going to stand out. But you have to remember that as you speak to candidates, whoever that first point of contact is, whether it's the receptionist doing pre-screens or interviews, or whether you have a true recruitment team or a recruiter speaking with candidates, the candidate experience will make or break your brand, really, and will make or break your ability to hire candidates. And it sounds simple, and this part actually is, that if you are speaking to a candidate and you don't treat them with professionalism and respect and follow up as you say you would, any positive experience, we all know somebody's going to maybe tell their family member that they had a good experience with Mosaic, or who that may be. But if I forget to call you back, Dr. Bug, after I interview you, you're probably going to tell 5 to 10 people that you dedicated an hour of your time to Mosaic, and I waited, and that Andrea said she would call me back after 3 days, and it's been 3 weeks and I still haven't heard from her. There's your brand tarnished right there. So you have to be very, very thoughtful around that candidate experience. And we'd need another session on candidate experience, because candidate experience comes down to the application process and the onboarding process and so many different factors. But I would say be kind to your candidates. It is a candidate market. And so the brand is one thing, but candidate focus, it has to be number one.
And I think we'll spend the next 30 years learning that and evolving with it and
It's true.
It really is, because this has been an ongoing discussion for years, but again, continues to change, especially in this current shortage. And to that degree, it should always be great, which is, again, we were talking about this morning with a candidate we're bringing in right now, the white glove treatment. How do we want best represent at the start, the middle, and the end of that changeover for them, especially if they're coming into a new environment?
Oh, so important. Like you said, right? It's there has to be that alignment between the story that we're telling up front, and then when someone is here and settled, it has to feel the same. They have to feel like they have the support that they were promised, or the tools, or the ability to enroll in that course, whatever it may be. It has to ring true. So it's a team effort to make sure that the initial point of contact person, that recruiter, that receptionist, whoever it may be, really translates that candidate's needs all the way through, so they're not forgotten about.
Agreed. Excellent. Mike, as we come to a close.
I have another question. I'll keep it super quick. You touched on a lot on storytelling, and I'm a big believer in effective communicators being fantastic storytellers. So just for our listeners, tactically, any resources that you recommend, whether that's books or podcasts, anything that can help them build that storytelling ability?
Yes, a book called "Building a Story Brand" by Donald Miller. Donald Miller, that's his name. Love this book. It is it really leans more towards marketing, but brilliantly talks about marketing and storytelling. And storytelling and marketing and employer brand go so beautifully hand in hand, because the one thing we didn't talk about today that we'll have part 4 of eventually, I'm sure, is how you launch an EVP. You can develop an EVP, but I think a lot of people think that once you've developed an EVP and the different elements that encompass it, that you can now go to Staples and print some wall decals and put them on the wall and hope that everybody walks in with their coffee every morning going, oh, and there's a chant that happens when you walk. That's not the case at all, right? That is the opposite way that you want to go about this. And so they're almost I would almost avoid a launch of an EVP. I think the way to the quote unquote launch an EVP is to have your employees start living this. And I think, it can start with, the leadership team talking about things when the leadership talks about something, employees tend to care about it. So if you can have your partners and leadership team and individuals throughout the clinic talking about those values and how they're living them and how they gave back to the community, if community is a value, or how much they learned from this course that they just went to in Kentucky, that's pure demonstration of that EVP and that employer brand. And so storytelling is so critical on social media and so many other pieces, because it's pure demonstration that what we're saying is real. It's evidence.
So true. Oh, that is great. And it looks like we are going to have round two, because I know in storytelling this year, I've learned a lot from you, Andrea. And I know the first time that came to fruition where we saw it was at CVMA. And there's a lot of storytelling at the CVMA. First time we've represented ourselves with a booth, and a lot of great conversation. And the storytelling is the thing that's caught and really brought us forward to then our next steps and next steps after that. Really, really important, and only the start. So unfortunately, we need to move into our next round of our podcast, as we're already over time. So with that, then we're going to move into impact round. And our impact round is a series of short questions, Andrea, of which the first question, and answer them whichever way you'd like to, is, are you a cat or a dog person?
Dog person all the way.
Knew you were going there. So interesting new question, though, given you are not a veterinarian, is, at this time in your life, are you doing what you thought you'd be doing since you were a kid?
No, but I love my job. So I think that's why I haven't thought about it.
Nice. How would your friends then describe what you do for a living?
They would probably say I do HR stuff, because most people don't understand what HR is.
Perfect. What is your favorite hobby?
Ooh, right now it's spending time doing whatever with my 2-year-old. But when I have some me time, I love baking.
And you are a foodie as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
What in this world are you most grateful for?
100% my family and my health.
Nice. Well, with that, we come to the end of our impact round, and thank you very much for taking on the invitation to join us for this podcast, knowing that we're into new areas within the veterinary industry, within Mosaic and Company. And I thank Michael as well for having us on board today to talk about what it really is, I hope, a topic and a subject that only becomes more to fruition within the veterinary industry. This is an area that we as a group could, even, group being the whole industry, do better with, to the benefit of our employees, our employers, our brands, everything across the industry, to letting individuals and groups know who we are all about. So thank you, Andrea, for the education. It feels like we learned a lot today. We're going to have to rebrief and come back together for part 2, if you're comfortable with that, because like you said, we just got started.
Oh, absolutely. No, this was an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
If people want to get a hold of you, learn more about this message, where would they reach out to, Andrea?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. And my last name is spelled Matrangolo. There's not many Matrangolos. My name is Andrea again. So please feel free to send me a note on LinkedIn, and happy to connect with you, like I said, virtually or in coffee if you happen to be in the Calgary area, and always happy to connect.
Excellent. Well, with that, as we do with all of our guests, the last message remains with you. What message do you want to leave for the veterinary community? Happy
EVP building, happy employer brand building, and best of luck. It's a tricky space, but you're better at it already than you think you are. There's no wrong way to start this. So best of luck, and please reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap, on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly. So be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.